Welcome back, Tiger fans. On this episode of Tiger Talk, we got a special one for you here. I am joined by Major League Baseball scout Joe Doyle of the Future Stars series. You can find him all over social media at Joe Doyle, MILB. Joe, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, Alex. Happy. I think I joined your podcast last year. I could be wrong, but if I did, happy to be back. And if I didn't, nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, it's our first time, so I'm excited. You're definitely down to make this a regular deal. I've enjoyed looking at your content and getting some good insights. I know you just got back from the combine. Just one quick general question first before we get into specific players about the combine. What is the impact what impact does the combine have for Major League Baseball for the players? Both positively and negatively.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, at least for me and folks that I talk to, the data they can pull from putting these guys into a batter's box with a wooden bat is obviously very important. Getting these guys stacked up next to their peers, there's a very real thing in scouting. Like, how does a guy fill out a uniform? Like, does he look the part? Does he look the part of a big leaguer? How do you carry yourself in those kinds of pressure cooker situations where you're expected to act like a pro? You're expected to act like you're going out for a job interview. So filling out a uniform, comparing guys, frames next to their peers, seeing what it all looks like with a wooden bat, and then things that some of us don't have access to, but we kind of get intel in talking to some teams after the combine is, how do these guys interview? At the end of the day, like, are you going to mesh with the team's culture? Are you going to mesh with a philosophy? Are you going to buy into the analytic processes that an organization is trying to instill in every single player? And do you have the maturity to survive in Major League Baseball? Do you have the maturity to survive that first huge signing bonus check? These are all questions that kind of need to be figured out along the way. And I think the combine does a pretty good job of getting everyone in one room to stack them all up next to one another.
Yeah, it was fun kind of watching some of those drills and stuff on MLB Network. One guy that really seemed to stand out, it's currently on the roster that's got a decision to make, is Jared Jones. How do you see him? Do you think there's any chance that he ends up back on campus next year?
Dude, I'm telling you, he is one of the most difficult players for me to evaluate in this class. And I truly do mean that. Right now, I've got Jared Jones as the 199th ranked prospect in this class. And that's actually up about 60 spots, if I'm not mistaken, from where I had him in my top 600 after his performance with the wooden bat in his hands. Now, the thing with Jared Jones, I never doubted the power. I mean, you look at the kid, he's 6'5", 6'4", 235 pounds. Like, he's a mountain of a man. It's clearly some of the best power in the college baseball class. But the thing with Jared Jones is, you've seen it, you've watched it, we've all watched it. There's a little bit of swing and miss there. And when you're talking about a kid who, he qualifies for this draft by one day. He qualifies for the 2024 draft by one day. So he will still be reasonably young in the 2025 draft. But with Jared, it's just like, where's he going to play? Is he athletic enough to play first base at the next level? Is he athletic enough behind the plate to have any sort of chance of being a Evan Gaddis, Mitch Garver slugging platoon catcher? Like, if you think he's a designated hitter, exclusively a designated hitter, he probably has like an 8th or a 9th round grade. But if you think he has a chance to catch, or you think he has a chance to play first base, you could probably make a case for Jared Jones in the 5th or 6th round. And at that point, is 350 grand or 400 grand for him to go pro more enticing than another year in Baton Rouge, where he could become, one of the most revered sluggers in program history? I mean, he could put up some absolutely gaudy numbers. So, yeah, he's a really tough one for me. I don't think he's going to be a guy that's in play earlier than the 4th or 5th round. But if a team buys into the power and thinks he can play a little bit of the field, I'd say it's 50-50. It's a toss-up.
Do you think he could really elevate his draft stock by coming back another year?
That's the thing, is I don't think there's a whole lot for Jared Jones to prove if he were to come back. I mean, if you just look at his numbers from this year, he is not going to improve on his exit velocity numbers, right? He's a mature hitter. He doesn't chase outside of the zone. But the thing with Jared Jones is, he posted a 63% contact rate this year. That's a 37% whiff rate. He definitely has issues with the slider. He definitely has issues with just making consistent contact on velocity and some pitches inside of the strike zone. So do I think he could? I mean, the trajectory for Jared Jones to turn into a third round pick, for example, would be the Ivan Melendez route, which, if you don't know who Ivan Melendez is, 2021, Texas, immense amounts of swing and miss. 6'5", 240 pounds, huge power. Melendez found a way over the course of 1 year to drive that whiff rate all the way down to 19 or 20%. If Jared Jones, but Jared Jones has always been a swing and miss guy. If Jared Jones can figure out a way to bring that whiff rate down 17 or 18%, which is a mountain of a task, maybe he does get into that third or fourth round. But the route to get there, especially as you lose leverage as you get older, is narrow. So it's going to be fascinating to see what he does. I personally think he'll go back to school, but again, 50, 60-40, it's close.
That's interesting because most of the guy, most people around here, around Baton Rouge, assume that he's gone.
I mean, I can't doubt them at all, but I don't believe Jared Jones is going to be 21 years old for this draft. I think he's going to be 20 years old with like 4 or 5 weeks to go, 3 or 4 weeks to go until he turns 21. So if he could conceivably enter his name back into the 2025 draft, still just 21 years old, you could make the case that he's still green and has some development ahead of him.
Now, the next thing I want to talk about is another guy's got a decision to make who LSU fans are kind of nervous about. It's Griffin Herring. I mean, obviously, he was one of the best relief pitchers in college baseball last year. Fastball slider, been really good. Now, in the Cape, he's really kind of featured his changeup as maybe a third pitch. Do you think that maybe elevates him in some teams' mind to show that he could be a starter?
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's a strike thrower. He's a left-handed 6'2", 195 pounds, athletic, repeats, fastball, slider, both really good. I think he was up to 96 or 97 this year. And that's the whole thing with the Cape, right? I mean, if you're in Baton Rouge and you're coming out of the bullpen and your job is to close the door, your job is to get big outs late in the game, Jay Johnson isn't going to want you experimenting with a changeup, right? He's putting you in 1-2 punch. Let's knock the doors down, get this game over with. Now he goes to the Cape. He's able to flip over some of these changeups, showcase a third pitch. Yeah, I mean, if he performs well and he shows a changeup that is even average, I think Griffin Herring probably jumps into that fourth or fifth round range, maybe the third round range if you really buy into the value of the fastball and the slider. But right now, I think he's more of a sixth or a seventh round pick, kind of in that same boat as Justin Lohr, like very, very similar players. I think I have Lohr in the eighth or ninth, Herring in the sixth or seventh. But with the ability to show that changeup, Herring clearly a better prospect than Lohr, with a chance to elevate his name a little bit. So he's a guy that I'm watching. I'm making sure to tune in and see exactly what's going on with his starts, because this is a big opportunity for a guy that didn't get too many opportunities to show extended showings for LSU this season.
Yeah, but if he comes back next year and he's going to get the opportunity to be a starter, he's going to get every opportunity to be a starter next year at LSU, and he shows that he can be a consistent starter in the SEC. What do you think his ceiling could be?
Yeah, so I liken it to Brandon Sproat at Florida last year. So Sproat decided to return to school. He improved his draft stock a little bit, got up into the top of the second round. But to your point, there's not a ton of guys. There's not a ton of household names that Griffin Herring is going to be, battling in 2025. Listen, LSU is loaded, right? They've got Devin Sheeran, they've got Zach Cowan coming in, they've got Chase Shores at some point. Cade Anderson, I'm assuming, is going to be one of the dudes in that rotation next season. Camden Wicker, I think, is really interesting. I don't personally, when I list off those names, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see any besides Devin Sheeran and to a lesser extent Cade Anderson. I don't see any like A plus, prime grade blue chip dudes that Griffin Herring can't supersede to take one of those Friday, Saturday, Sunday spots. So as it stands today, if LSU doesn't get another kid in the transfer portal, a Zach Root, a Landon Beetle, she's one of those kids that are left. I would think that Griffin Herring is a very, very high likelihood starter in 2025.
Yeah, and you think that that'll, do you think he could maybe work himself into the late, like you said, the second round, like Brandon Sproat? Is that kind of what you think he could do?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you listen, everyone's looking for a lefty that has a little bit of velo and three pitches. You're going to see Gage Jump go pretty good in this class because he's got three pitches. He can spin it like Griffin Herring. If you give Griffin Herring the ability to show 85 or 90 pitches on a consistent basis, I think Griffin Herring can jump into that third round range. So I do expect it's not going to be cheap for someone to just take Griffin Herring in the 8th round, expect to give him 250 grand and expect he walks away from Baton Rouge. I do think that someone's going to have to pay him handsomely to pull him away from that. I guess, was this his second year on campus? The third year on campus. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then kind of looking at the current roster and going down the list of some other guys, looking at Michael Braswell, at shortstop. He really improved his batting average pretty significantly, this year from what he showed at South Carolina, but doesn't really seem like he's going to be a shortstop at the next level. Had a lot of errors. Correct me if you think I'm wrong there, but to me, it doesn't seem like he's a shortstop at the pro level. But what do you see out of Braswell?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Braswell is he went through such an enormous swing change this season, changing his swing plane, changing his load. And they did a good job at LSU and getting more out of his bat. He wasn't what he is today at South Carolina. I do think Braswell is a second baseman. I think you're right. I think take a little bit of pressure off of that glove. The thing with Braswell that's probably going to keep him out of the top, I mean, I'll just say I've got him in the 12th or 13th or 14th round. I've got him as a day 3 guy. Is Braswell just doesn't have any impact in the bat. Like there's not a whole lot of juice. Now he makes a ton of contact, in the zone. He covers pitches on the outside of the zone, but he just doesn't hit for much game power. So that's going to be something that he's going to have to overcome at the next level if he hopes to capitalize on what is pretty impressive bat to ball skills. But as a right-handed second baseman who hasn't shown a ton of pop at the college level, he's either going to be a late day 2 guy or a day 3 guy, and it might not be the end of the world for him to go back to school either. But as you know, with Stephen Milam and some of those kids that are coming back to LSU, it gets pretty crowded in that lineup pretty fast.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. I know Jay Johnson would like to have him back. For no other reason than to have that experience back. And Jay Johnson's a big fan of Michael Braswell's. But kind of looking at some other guys on the current roster, you mentioned Justin Lohr. What do you see out of him? You said like 9th or 10th round pick, I think is what you said a minute ago.
Yeah. I mean, like the thing with Lohr is he's pitched in so many different situations. I mean, he threw 3, 4, 5 inning outings at Xavier. It was shorter outings this year. I know they kind of threw him in some longer extended shots here and there. I don't know if Justin has a third pitch. I mean, I know he has a third pitch. I've seen the data. It's there. I don't know if it is a usable third pitch. Given his unique angles, given his length and what he can do from the left side, I kind of think he's going to end up being a 7th inning reliever at the next level. And when you're talking about a kid that is his size, I think it's going to come down to, is there a team out there that believes they can get Justin Lohr throwing 94 to 97? Because he's a long kid. He's not an explosive mover, but he's an athletic, lanky, like whip crack type of kid from the left side with weird, unique angles. He's either going to be something very, very unique out of the bullpen in the 7th inning, or someone's going to experiment and try and get him a chance to start at the next level. I don't think there's going to be enough buyers that think he's going to start at the next level. And for that reason, I think he's probably going to be a priority bullpen ad in the 9th or 10th round, or one of those 12th or 13th or 14th round guys that could move extremely quickly through a minor league system.
Yeah, so it seems like a guy that's just going to kind of depend on what he wants. If he wants to go pro, he's going to have that option. If he wants to come back, I mean, but I guess if he comes back, he'll lose all his leverage. So,
Yeah.
probably going to take the money and go, and certainly not going to fault him for that. Um, and then when you're looking at the bullpen again, Fidel Ula, what do you see out of him? I mean, he flashed some pretty premium stuff at times, this year.
I think Ulloa is going to throw considerably harder. I mean, I know he's been up to 97 this year, but here's the thing, like it's big stuff. Like it's 97. I think he's going to approach 99 with more training and more development. It is a bit of a dead zone heater. Like there's not a ton of intrinsic value in the way that he shapes a fastball, but he does command it very, very well. I think he would be a sleeper to start on Tuesdays or Thursdays in 2025 if he comes back. Although I don't see that happening right now. He needs to throw the hell out of that slider. Like it's two planes, it's slurvy, it's been hell on right-handed hitters. But that's kind of where the narrative ends. Like I kind of listed it all out. It's high velocity. It's 94 to 96, touching 97, 98 with a budding breaking ball that could be plus at the next level with a ton of arm speed and athleticism. I think Fidel Ulloa is probably going to be another one of those guys that goes in the third round just because he's a right-handed relief prospect. But again, like all it takes is one team to have sat in on him throwing 2 or 3 innings this year and got a good look and said, this kid can start. Like, let's see if we can get this kid turning over a changeup. This kid is a good enough athlete to start. And if that's the case, then he goes in the 6th round. But for me, I haven't yet talked to a team that think he's going to start. So for that reason, I've got him in that 300 to 400 range going early on day 3.
Yeah, and then kind of moving on to some of the guys that are in, LSU signing class, at the top, there's some really premium guys there at the top. 3 guys in particular that LSU fans would love to see on campus, but I mean, I don't really see a possibility of them making it on campus, but maybe you see a little bit differently. And that's Connor Griffin, Cam Caminetti, and William Schmidt. Any shot those guys make it to campus?
There's a 0% chance that Connor Griffin is making it to campus. I'll tell you that right now. And I would give the chances of Cam Caminetti making it to campus at about 1%. I mean, there's so much heat on him in the top 15 picks that guys don't reclassify. Griffin and Caminetti, that you don't reclassify to go to college a year early. You just don't. I mean, you do it to improve your draft stock. You do it to improve your standing in draft models and things like that. So I don't see any way that either one of those guys makes it to campus. William Schmidt, I mean, there's a little bit of a chance there because there are some other high school arms that have kind of surfaced here late. But as a kid that is up to 100 with arguably the biggest curveball in the class, I think he's going to get paid. Even if it's in, the 45 to 50 range, I still think William Schmidt is going to get paid. And I'll add a couple other guys in there that I don't see a big chance of them making it to campus. Michael Ryan is a shortstop out of Luling, Louisiana. The more I talk to teams, the more I talk to folks, I don't think there's a chance that Michael Ryan is making it to school. I could be wrong, but we'll see. And I don't know if you're going to ask this next question, so I apologize for kind of jumping ahead a little bit. But with Derek Curiel pulling his name out of the draft, he's really interesting to me. Like I saw him late as a high school sophomore, and then I saw him again as a to-be senior in July and August last year. And he just hadn't gotten any stronger. I mean, he just wasn't hitting the ball any harder. He could still field, he could still hit, but there's just no impact in his bat. I'm telling you, man, you get Derek Curiel into LSU's nutrition program and weight program, and you put 12 to 15 pounds on that kid, he could be an exemplary player for the Tigers for 2 or 3 years. He could be a kid that, hits at the very top of that lineup for 3 seasons while playing center field. I mean, he could be a first round pick in 2027. So I would be excited about him, but the biggest thing is he's got to add weight.
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly where I was going to go next was Derek Curiel. So you think he's got the potential to be another, maybe not quite have the career Dylan Cruz did, but maybe in that same kind of vein?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the name of the kid who was drafted in 2021 by the Detroit Tigers. If you've got it at the top tip of your tongue, let me know, because he reminds me a lot of that kid. Maybe it was 2020. there was a corner outfielder. We can cut this out or whatever. But he went to LSU. He was Daniel Cabrera. That's who it was. He reminds me a lot of Daniel Cabrera. Daniel Cabrera was a hitter. Like, he was a hitter the first year he was on campus, first 2 years he was on campus. Then he got a little stronger, and that swing really took off. There's a little bit of Daniel Cabrera in Derek Curiel. He's a better athlete than Cabrera. He can actually play center field, but that would be the type of like career trajectory in Baton Rouge that I would look at.
Yeah, no, Tiger fans definitely gonna like hearing that because he was kind of a fan favorite, when he left Baton Rouge. But then another guy that Tiger fans have their eye on because of the catching positions is looking real thin at LSU right now with the departure of Brady Neal. So Cade Aaron Biddy, is that what's the chances he makes it to campus?
I think it's actually pretty decent. I would put it at 50-50. The thing with Aaron Biddy is teams are just split on if he's going to catch. It is a bit of a, I don't want to say it's a grooved swing, but like he is, ironically, I compared Aaron Biddy to Jared Jones. He's not as big as Jared Jones, but Jared Jones eventually phased his way out from behind the plate at LSU. Aaron Biddy is probably going to catch in the SEC because he has an absolute cannon for an arm. He needs to improve his blocking skills and framing skills. But there are very few guys that I've seen in this class that have a better arm than Aaron Biddy. I think if he eventually ends up moving to right field, for the pro fans out there, he reminds me a little bit of Hunter Renfroe. Like, it could end up being a Hunter Renfroe type of a player. And, that type of a guy, if he improves his swing and miss, could go in the second round in 2027. So I would say it's 50-50. I would also say his chances of sticking behind the plate are like 70-30. There's some cleanup there, but I look at it like this. You look at the LSU roster right now and what they've lost behind the plate with Travinsky on his way out and Neal on his way out. Aaron Biddy has to be looking at that and going, I could start 2 or 3 days a week as a true freshman in Baton Rouge. That in and of itself is leverage. So I think teams are kind of hot and cold on him. I think he's got a chance to go in the third round, but my gut kind of says that he ends up at school.
Another kind of catching prospect that LSU has committed is Blaze Priester. He's one that Tiger fans are real excited about. He's kind of flirted with LSU. He was actually on campus as a freshman in the fall, and then ended up leaving to go to JUCO for a couple of years at Meridian, and is JUCO All-American. Is he any sort of a draft risk? Is that somebody that they can be pretty confident is going to make it to campus?
I would be pretty confident that Priester is going to make it to campus. I've talked to a couple of scouts. I've talked to the guy that's representing Priester. It sounds to me like he's really looking forward to getting to campus. He had just such a mammoth year at MCC, 357 with 10 dingers. He can run a little bit. Yeah, he's a switch hitter. I like Priester a lot. I think he's going to get considerable opportunity to work behind the plate. I would say this, though. One other thing that I would add, I would be surprised if LSU is done on the transfer portal market for a catcher. Like, Jay Johnson is very, very good at this. He has to see what the roster looks like currently. And, Braden Montgomery hit the transfer portal last year on July 9th. We are not even close to done with seeing the type of talent that's going to hit the transfer portal before everything is said and done. So still think we have another couple weeks of headlines in that regard. So I would look for LSU to capitalize on a potential catcher in that market.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that they've got their eyes on some of the guys and kind of waiting to see what else who else might pop in there. Kind of getting into some of the transfer portal guys who maybe have a decision to make. Luis Hernandez is somebody who could play catcher, but is really kind of more of a first baseman. What do you see out of him?
Yeah, he's a future Star Series alum. It's a bat. Like it is a big bat. And I don't think, he might catch 4 or 5 times, or maybe LSU tries to develop him and get him behind the plate on Sundays to get whoever their presumed starter is off his feet a little bit. But he's certainly a first base first guy. He's a DH first guy. It's a big bat. Like he can hit, he can bang. I would put him at first base or DH on a nightly in that nightly basis. I don't think Luis Hernandez has much risk of being drafted, and that's nothing against him. It's just the right-handed hitting, right-handed throwing first base type coming from a small school. Like the those guys just they generally don't go in any draft, and especially when you have the leverage of an LSU commitment. I would expect him to be hitting third, fourth, or fifth for LSU in 2025.
Yeah, certainly. LSU losing Tommy White and maybe Jared Jones. We'll see what happens. They're in need of some big power. So we'll be excited to see him make it to campus if that's the way it goes. And then another guy who's kind of interesting is Chris Stanfield coming out of Auburn. He's his bats kind of maybe still needs to catch up a little bit, but man, he's so fast and he's so good out there in the outfield. What do you see out of him?
I think, and I've had conversations with people at LSU. They've called me when I put out my 500 and 600, and they ask, why do you have Stanfield so high? Like, should we actually worry about losing Stanfield in the draft? Like, what's your read on it? My read is the industry probably has more of a fourth or a fifth round grade on Stanfield. I've got a third round grade on him. I mean, he does so many things well. He's got raw power. He makes a ton of contact. He doesn't chase. He hits velocity. He covers spin, and he hits the ball in the air. Like Chris Stanfield isn't going to be a guy that is grounding out weakly to second base. I'm in love with the upside of Chris Stanfield. Most he's one of the twitchiest athletes in this class, and I think if LSU can try and tinker with him just a little bit, like they did with Michael Braswell, to just get the ball in the air a little bit more than he is, I think Stanfield he could turn himself into a top 50 pick in 2025 in Baton Rouge. I think he's that good, and I think the projection in how explosive he moves, like you put 10 pounds on that kid, 8 to 10 pounds on that kid, and just see whether or not it unlocks another gear in his bag of tricks at the plate. I mean, it's just some of the fastest hands, like some of the fastest hands you'll find in the SEC. So I tend to think he is going to make it to campus. I know there are teams that have turned him in with second round grades at the area scout level. That's never enough to get a kid taken exclusively in the second round. But I tend to think the commitment to LSU is going to be enough for teams to walk away from picking him late in the fourth or in the fifth round. But man, if I was an LSU Tiger fan, that would be the guy that I would be most excited about. Like the idea of Derek Carriel and Chris Stanfield batting first and second in front of some bangers should have you pretty pumped up for the 2025 season.
I mean, you're getting me hyped for it already.
That's what I'm here for, man.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. I wanted to get back to some of the high school guys for a second. One guy I meant to ask you about was Boston Baitman. We were kind of talking about him a little bit before we started recording. What do you see out of him? He's a big lefty.
Yeah, Boston Baitman is probably along the same lines as William Schmidt in terms of chances to make it to campus. Here's like so I have never seen Boston Bateman great. A lot of scouts have seen him great. And so for my process and the way that I do things, I have him as a top of the third round pick, like someone that goes in the top 100 picks. There are guys out there that have seen Bateman at his absolute best, you know, up to 97, workhorse frame, tons and tons of strikes with a breaking ball that he has tremendous feel for. That just straight up doesn't grow on trees. Like a 6'8 lefty who pounds the zone is up to 97 or 98. with a changeup and a slider that he can throw for strikes. I've never personally seen it good against the opposition, but a lot of guys have. I don't think Baitman makes it out of the second or comp B. Like, he's probably off the board in the top 76 picks. I would say that the chances of him getting to school are probably pretty slim, especially because he's a kid from Cali. You know, if he was in your backyard, if he was a Louisiana boy and he grew up in the Southeast and he always wanted to play for LSU, maybe it would be a little bit different. But yeah, I think the chances of Bateman making it to school are pretty low.
Yeah, I think that's what LSU fans are hoping for William Schmidt, is that the draw of playing for the hometown team is going to be too much for him.
No doubt. Yeah. And listen, William Schmidt is a right-hander, and he's mostly only got 2 pitches. He does have a third pitch. He can throw in a cutter, he can flip over a changeup, but he's mostly 2 pitches. And the demographic that scouts and teams and front offices are more reluctant to go after in any draft is the right-handed high school pitcher. So just for that, like, as a standalone in a vacuum statement, you could probably make the case that while William Schmidt is a better pitching prospect than Boston Bateman, the chances of Boston Bateman making it to campus might be even lower than Schmidt.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And then also looking at, kind of the some of the position players in the signing class, in the shortstop, Casson Evans and David Hogg, those guys, I'm pretty sure, I believe they were both at the combine. I could be wrong on that, but I think they were both. Yeah. What did you see from them?
Well, I think Casson Evans is going to be a right-handed pitcher personally. I mean, it's a smooth operation. It's strikes. He can hold velocity into the 3rd or 4th inning. He's, mostly just been into the low 90s, so he'll get a tick above that. I think he's going to be a pitcher at the end of the day. It's a good curveball. It is. It's a really good curveball. David Hogg is one of my favorite players in this class that probably doesn't get enough attention. And it's mostly because he's just not the craziest, smoothest athlete in the world. Like, it's already 6'2", 205-ish, probably ends up at third base. But like, when you're looking at data, when you're looking at metrics, David Hogg makes more contact than just about anybody in this class in the tournament and showcase circuit. He hits for power. When you look at his blast data with his hand speed, his barrel speed, how fast he rotates, he's up there with absolutely everybody. He's not the most fluid athlete in the world. Like, he's not this guy that glides on the dirt, or he's not going to post plus run times. But I think if David Hogg makes it to campus, and I tend to think at this stage he is going to make it to campus, could be wrong, could totally be wrong. I think he's the guy that surprises everyone and hits 6 for LSU for much of 2025, and could be a lineup staple at third base or first base or left field in 2026 and 2027. So that would be a name that I'm really excited about if I'm LSU. But I don't know if we're going to get to this kid, but I want to bring him up because his brother's already there. John Pearson could be the next Tommy White. Like, straight up, it's the same with Tommy White. Like, Tommy White went to college as a third baseman, played a little bit of third base at NC State, mostly first base. John Pearson is going to play a little bit of the outfield, and he's going to play first base. That kid has tree trunk forearms, and he is so much different than his brother. Like, his brother is smaller and more explosive and left-handed and can bang a little bit. John Pearson is just like pure thunder. So listen, this is a really interesting freshman class coming into LSU. Derek Curiel is the athlete. It's the up the middle. It's the left-handed swing. It's the hitter, right? John Pearson is just a thumping first baseman who makes a ton of contact, fast hands, Tommy White-esque. David Hogg is a metric darling. And then, you look at some of the other guys that are coming. I don't know how many of these guys are going to make it to campus, but Cale Fountain, I mean, that's mammoth power at third base. Maybe he's a first baseman. I don't know. There's a lot of guys in the LSU class that have carrying tools that really stand out on the field. And if 3 or 4 of them the offensive players make it to campus, you could see a decent chunk of true freshmen playing, we'll call it big minutes for the Tigers in 2025. And they're players that I wouldn't be afraid to put in the lineup either.
Yeah, it seems to be the general consensus that there's going to be a lot of young that this next year is probably going to be even younger than this team was.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned John Pearson. His brother Josh, he's going to have a decision to make. What sort of grade do you have on Josh?
I'll come out and first say a lot of people are higher on Josh than I am. I've got Josh. Yeah, I've got Josh in the 13th or 14th round. Let's see. Yeah, prospect pedigree. Yeah, I mean, Josh Pearson was a big guy in the 2022 draft, and he's just kind of been sporadically used at LSU. Like sometimes it's almost like he's been a platoon type guy. I think it'd be cool if he went back to campus. I don't have any any specific idea whether or not he's going to sign. I've got him as a day 3 guy, but it'd be kind of cool to have Josh Pearson back on campus with his brother. So again, another kid that my gut would tell me he goes back. My gut would tell me he goes back to school. Not a guy that's talked about like a whole ton.
Yeah. One more guy I wanted to ask you about is a guy from the JUCO ranks, Connor Ware. He's LSU's going to be kind of trying to rebuild the pitching staff. We've kind of touched on some of the guys that they've got coming in, but what do you think about Connor Ware?
Boy, we've talked about a lot of projectable long lefties today.
Yeah.
Connor Ware is maybe the most projectable of the bunch. I've got him up to 96 with a breaker that is flashed above average, and he throws strikes. Like that's the biggest thing that you're looking for in the SEC. You need a guy that has stuff, and you need a guy that's not going to get in his own way. And Connor Ware throws a ton of strikes. I would expect that Connor Ware makes it to campus, but that being said, the one thing that will be possibly a roadblock from that happening is he's only going to be 20 years old for the draft. And you're talking about a 6'4", 185-pound lefty who's been up to 95, 96 with a breaking ball and he throws strikes. I mean, I just talked to you about, Cade Anderson and Griffin Herring and strikes from a left-hander gauge jump. Strikes, velocity, 3 pitches, and left-handed, doesn't grow on trees. But he's a JUCO that is committed to LSU. And for a lot of guys, that's a dream. And for a lot of guys, for one thing that we're not talking about is NIL. We have no idea if Connor Ware has been offered an NIL package and how that stacks up against what a signing bonus might look like. Because, if you're Connor Ware and you're being promised, I'd name your number $60,000, $75,000 to come to LSU in 2025, how does that stack up with being offered, 125 or 175 grand in the 8th round and not getting the chance to improve your draft stock into that 4th or 5th round range for 2025. So he's a bit of a toss up for me. I think there are teams that are going to fall in love with it. I don't think Connor Ware has a devastating out pitch yet, and that's something that he could certainly develop in Baton Rouge. But he just has some of the model traits that teams are going to fall in love with. So again, maybe I would call it 50-50. That's just a hunch. I've currently got Connor Ware in the 12th round, and we'll see. I wish he had a better breaking ball because it would make it a little bit easier if it was a plus breaker. But yeah, I mean he's not too dissimilar from what Griffin Herring is positioned with in the 2024 draft right now.
Yeah, I know I said that was the last guy I was going to ask you about, but there are a couple more guys that, no shot to stay on campus, but just, to kind of hear where you think they're going to go in the draft. And that's, you mentioned Gage Jump, Luke Holman, Tommy White, what are you hearing from teams? Where do you think those guys are going to end up being drafted?
Yeah, I thought it was curious that Tommy White elected not to go to the combine. He's had such a strange year with the shoulder surgery coming into this year, and his exit velocities are down a little bit. I thought he looked good at third base, which is going to be a big part of his draft stock. Whether or not someone believes they can put him at third base and get, even Miguel Sano level defense at third base for the first 5 or 6 years of his control years. Tommy White, I think, has a chance to go in the 20 to 30 range. I think he's got just as good a chance to go in the 35 to 50 range. It really depends on what you're buying. Are you buying the 2023 version of Tommy White, who swung at everything and chased outside of the zone at everything, but still made a ton of contact? Or are you drafting the Tommy White from 2024, which made a little bit less contact and still swung at everything and still chased at everything? And it's kind of tough, that profile, that right-handed hitting, ultra hyper swing at everything profile at the next level, it doesn't generally translate well. So I think he is a talented enough player to still go in the first round. I just don't know exactly where he fits. Holman, I think, is going to be a very big priority for teams, either in the Comp A round or in the first half of the second round. I think it's an interesting 6'4" frame. He's got a good breaking ball. He's got a fastball that performed a lot better than its metrics. So I think he just naturally hides the ball pretty well. I don't think he's going to make it out of the top 55 or 60 picks. And then Gage Jump made himself some money in the regionals and the super regionals. I thought he was absolutely dynamic for the Tigers when they needed him to be dynamic. I think there's a chance that he goes on day one, kind of in that 50 to 76, 50 to 75 range. And if he does make it out of the second round, I don't think there's any shot that he makes it into the fourth round. I think he's going to be a priority grab in the third round for someone. So everyone that you just listed, White and Holman, I expect to go in the top 50. White probably in the top 30, and then Gage Jump, I just don't think there's any chance he makes it out of the top 90 or 100 picks. They should all go pretty quick.
What about Thatcher Hurd? That's a guy who's really interesting. He really had an up and down career at LSU. Flash had some big moments in the College World Series last year, but this year, man, just had a hard time getting on the field.
I don't know, dude. Thatcher Hurd is talented enough just in terms of like pure arm talent that he's not gonna last long. Like up to 97, it's 93 to 94 consistently. He can break off a 3,000 RPM breaking ball. He's got a changeup. Like that is one of the most confusing profiles, I think, for anyone in this class. I don't know how Hurd. Well, the injuries won't help, but I don't know how a guy with that kind of stuff got hit so hard. I mean, guys hit the breaking ball. I don't know if it's an issue with Thatcher not commanding the pitch. I don't know if it's an issue with Thatcher Hurd not hiding the ball and just everything is very well seen out of the hand. I don't know, but it's a starting pitcher operation. It's 3 pitches. It's generally strikes. They're not great, but it is generally strikes. I would expect that he goes in the third or the fourth round in the top 125, 130 picks because, listen, 6'4", athletic, 230 pounds, 3 pitches, up to 97. There's strikes. That's the sort of clay that teams are looking to develop at the minor league level. It's just one of those weird things where I don't even know what Thatcher Hurd's ERA was this year, but it's just one of those weird things that a guy with an ERA of 6, I'm just throwing out a number, is going to get $800,000 in the draft. He's one of the more confusing guys in college baseball, but I still think teams are really bullish on what he can innately do on the mound.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, Joe. And we'll go ahead and get you out of here. If you're not already following Joe, make sure you follow him on Twitter. Catch him on Future Star Series, Overslot Podcasts. Anything else? Did I miss anything, Joe?
No, man. You kind of laid out how busy I am. So I appreciate you giving me some time today, dude.
I appreciate you giving me some time, man. And we'll definitely stay in touch, and we'll do this again sometime.
All right, Alex. And you are right. College baseball is rad.
College baseball is awesome. I love it.